Hello, I am the older granddaughter of Paula Nancy Millstone Jennings, and I wish to remain anonymous.
I am the younger granddaughter of Paula Nancy Millstone Jennings and wish to remain even more anonymous.
You are listening to the Digital Watches Our Pretty Neat Idea podcast with your hosts, Jeff and Bryan.
And you thought my grandmother's poetry was bad?
Hello, this is Jeff. The episode Bryan and I recorded for Mostly Harmless went way longer than I hoped. I knew it was going to be one of our longer episodes, but I did not expect it to approach 2.5 hours. The decision was made to break it into 2 parts like we did with the Doctor Who and the Cricket Men episode. However, since we do a questionable answers bonus episode after each of the books, part 2 will be pushed to next month's episode so we can do the questionable answers in the bonus episode after that. Between parts 1 and 2, we will have an extra special bonus episode for Valentine's Day. Even though it will have very little to do with the Hitchhiker's universe and absolutely nothing to do with Valentine's Day, it should be fun nonetheless. So I hope you join us for that, but right now we're going to talk about the first half of Mostly Harmless after a message from one of our proud sponsors.
Hi, this is Eccentrica. I've come to the Digital Watches Our Pretty Neat Idea podcast to promote my book tour. I'll be making an appearance in a solar system near you to sign my 2 autobiographical novels. The Big Bang Theory, A Personal View, and It's Just One Boob After Another. I'll be waiting.
Hey Bryan, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jeff. How are you?
Well, I think you ought to know I'm feeling very depressed.
Oh my goodness, why is that?
Did you read this book?
Yes, I did. I did indeed.
This book is a downer pretty much from beginning to end.
Yes. I don't know if it's giving anything away, but we all know how it ends. That's for sure.
Yes. Well, we're guessing that if you're tuning into this, you've either read it or you don't care if there's any spoilers because that's what we're here for.
Yes, we are the spoilers.
Yeah. Or maybe you're reading along.
There you go.
So like all the previous books, this one starts out with another profound passage.
Right.
The first book had the far out in the uncharted backwaters, and that set the scene for the entire series of books.
That's correct.
And you know how much I really liked the beginning of Restaurant, where they had the, if anyone ever figures out the question and the answer, everything gets erased, so to speak.
Right.
Life, the Universe, and Everything didn't have a preface. And you know my feelings about the modified one for So Long and Thanks for All the Fish.
Right.
Actually, I really liked the preface, but I just didn't like that they didn't do what the preface said they were going to do.
Oh, now you're going to get everybody twisted up.
But this one starts out with, anything that happens, happens. Anything that, in happening, causes something else to happen, causes something else to happen. Anything that, in happening, causes itself to happen again, happens again. It doesn't necessarily do it in chronological order, though. So this really sounds like something. It really does, but it's just one of those things I think that is supposed to sound good. I'm guessing it's a introduction in a way to temporal reverse engineering.
Yes, 100%. That's exactly what it's trying to do.
But it depends on kind of how you interpret what that means. So my interpretation of temporal reverse engineering would be that you do not start with having a result you start with a desired result, and then it goes back in time and makes sure that everything happens in chronological order to get you to this point.
Right. And, we are bouncing a bit in the story, but I do think that what's important here is that he's trying to set up the whole general mishmash of what this story is going to be about. And we've had discussions in the past about what is an effect of the universe and what is an effect of the timeline, and how do the two interrelate with the probability and the probability matrix. So it's kind of an interesting spin on that, in my opinion, because it's looking over. Actually, like I said, we've had many conversations about the probability effect, and now it's saying that not only is there probability, there are things that are inevitable, that will happen no matter what.
Correct. And I guess on the chronological order part, if we want to just jump ahead a little bit and talk about the whole general mishmash, there is no order.
Right.
So it's not that it's happening out of order. It's there isn't a chronological order at all.
Well, you and I had a pre-discussion a little bit, not today, but earlier in the week, where we talked about some interesting facts that we'll get into a little bit in this story.
Oh, definitely.
I think we're going to leave some of that conversation for later, but I think as we go through the story, we're going to definitely see how the nature of this first passage gets played out. And I'm thinking specifically about the filters that we talked about before, the filters we have in our own lives. Right.
And they're little teasers, and I think I pointed them out in the 2 times that I noticed them with Ford.
Right.
He's the catalyst that's showing you that there's something going on.
Right.
Part 1. A Grabulon reconnaissance ship, with its crew in stasis, was on its way to a mission. The ship was hit by a meteorite, damaging the central mission module. The robot that retrieved the backup fell out of the hole made by the meteorite. The central mission module was lost to space. The only bits of information the damaged module could pass on to the crew was that they were to monitor something from a safe distance. The minds and memories of the crew were stored in the lost mission module for safekeeping. When they were revived, none of them knew who they were or why they were there. So they found somewhere to land and monitored a little blue-green planet. Tricia McMillan is a TV journalist from the UK in New York City to do an interview with Gail Andrews, the astrologist to the stars. Tricia is also in New York to interview for another job. Tricia received a note from Gail Andrews saying she was not happy and wanted to meet. She assumed Gail was unhappy about the interview. She had asked Gail about Persephone, nicknamed Rupert, a newly discovered planet on the outskirts of our solar system. She wanted to know if this discovery voided all the previous horoscopes, because there was a previously unknown planet influencing them. Tricia agreed to meet Gail in the bar of her hotel. Tricia asked Gail why she was not happy. Gail told her that her message was asking Tricia why she was not happy. In talking about astrology, Tricia seemed to be upset about the planets and the stars. Tricia told her a story that she had never told anyone before. She told her the story of being at a fancy dress party and meeting a man with 2 heads from another planet. He left the party and the planet without her when she went back for her bag. A limo driver for the TV studio found Tricia at the hotel, and she was whisked off to the TV studio for her screen test, leaving her bag in her room at the hotel. Her contact lenses were in the bag, and she could not read the script or the teleprompter. She did not get the job. Tricia returned home to London from New York. She needed a night out on the town. She decided to go to the new club owned by Stavro. She was just at his original club Alpha in New York, now being run by his brother, Carl Mueller. It was closed for a private party, so she went home. When Trisha got home, she was greeted by a spaceship landing in her yard. The Grebulons have been monitoring her. They knew all about her and believe she can help them. The Grebulons enjoy the horoscopes and need Trisha to recalculate them, taking into account the relative positions of Earth and Rupert. Trisha agreed to go with them to Rupert in exchange for an exclusive interview. Ford Prefect broke into the current offices of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, bypassing security by making a security robot very happy. Everything at the offices was just a little bit different. Ford learned that the guide has been taken over by Infinidim Enterprises. Ford went to the editor-in-chief's office to ask what was going on and was told he was now the restaurant critic. He was also told that they are planning to use the multidimensional properties of the universe to gain access to billions and billions of markets. After the editor-in-chief knocked himself out, Ford temporarily relieved him of his ID card.
Well, Chapter 1 starts out great. It's just an explanation of how everything in the galaxy got muddled and all the problems because of it. And that was a catalyst for many gags, and all of them seem to be funny and clever.
None of your favorites?
No, none of my favorites. It also talked about battles being over before the armies got there because of time travel.
Mm-hmm.
This was all done to set the stage for the introduction of the Grebulons.
Mm-hmm.
And they have lost their minds.
Yes.
So they are now at a safe distance from Earth, and they're monitoring everything that goes on Earth.
Right. I mean, we don't find out it's Earth until much later, but that's exactly what's going on.
Right.
They're in lurk mode. I like that. Lurk mode.
Right. So some of the gags that I had talked about, and I don't know if I have a particular favorite, but I did write down a couple that I thought were clever.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be this one about where people decide to live. And if you have to wrap yourself in a lot of other animals at one point in your planet's orbit and then find half an orbit later that your skin is bubbling, that might not be where you want to live.
Yep.
But a good runner-up would be about being in New York.
Right.
The best way to breathe is to open up a window and stick your head in a building.
Yep, I love that. During this part of the story, I think I really enjoyed a bunch of it. Again, I like how he uses the environment to create a joke. He's talking about the differences of travel with the different types of ships, and the only thing that they found that traveled faster than light speed was bad news.
Right. Yes, that was awesome.
And he said that they tried to create a ship that was powered by bad news, but it was frequently unwelcome when it finally arrived.
Right. Yeah.
Which I thought that was good. And then they talked about the introduction of the improbability ships and how that turned everything into banana fruitcake.
Yes, absolutely. So we learned that this version of the Earth that we're on has Trisha McMillan. She is in New York, and she's doing an interview for the TV station in the UK that she works for, but she's secretly trying to interview for a job in New York, and she got her TV in the UK to pay for her trip to New York.
Right.
After Trisha did her interview, she was waiting and hoping to get a call from this TV station in New York to do her interview, but it never came.
Mm-hmm.
And when she goes up to the desk receptionist, here is another one of those tedious conversations that I say he puts in all of his books that I think he believes are funny, but I guess I've had too many of these types of conversations to find them funny anymore.
What, you're not hippie?
No, I am not hippie. The interview that she was going to be doing in New York was because there was a new 10th planet discovered called Persephone, which was nicknamed Rupert after somebody's parrot.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to interview this prominent astrologist and ask her if all of astrology in the past was actually flawed because there was a planet that they didn't even know about affecting everything.
Right.
And so then the astrologist tried to do some sort of fancy talk with trigonometry, not realizing that Trisha also had a astrophysics degree and got in over her head.
Mm-hmm.
So during this tedious conversation, the one thing that the receptionist did get correct was the name, Gail Andrews.
Mm-hmm.
She just did an interview with Gail Andrews. So how in the world did she not recognize the name Gail Andrews?
Well, they do go into a bit about how disoriented she is and, from the flight and all that kind of stuff. And at one point I do like Adams says that she felt like her hair felt like it was bought at a fair on a stick.
Yeah, cotton candy.
Yeah, exactly. I did like that. So they do, they play it up that she's a little disheveled and lost, So I can forgive her for forgetting about Gail, because as they do say, she's not there to focus on Gail. She's there to focus on her own career.
Correct. In the middle of the tedious conversation with the receptionist, Gail Andrews walks into the lobby and says, "I'm Gail Andrews." And so then they end up and they meet in the bar to have this conversation about why Gail Andrews is not happy. But it turns out that it's not Gail Andrews that she was talking about. Gail was wondering why Trisha was not happy and seemed to be mad about planets.
Right. And Trisha's issue with the planets, of course, is that when she did meet Zaphod at the party years ago, and he invited her off world, she decided she would go with him, but told Zaphod to hang on a minute because she wanted to go and get her bag.
Correct.
In the intervening time, of course, Zaphod lost interest and left. And she knew at that time that she had missed the opportunity of a lifetime. So that's why she was angry at the world or all the other planets that were actually out there.
Right. And she had to quit her job as an astrophysicist because how can you be an astrophysicist when you've actually met somebody from another planet and you can't tell anybody?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Gail replied with something that I really liked.
Mm-hmm.
She said, "Everybody does that. Every moment of every day, every single decision we make, every breath we draw, opens some doors and closes many others. Most of them we don't notice. Some we do. Sounds like you noticed one."
Right.
I like looking back at the pivotal doors in my life and realize how vastly my life would be different if one door swung the other way.
Oh, that's a challenge.
It's a challenge? I don't find that a challenge at all. I can look back at particular points all throughout my life and say, if this didn't happen, I don't know where I'd be, but I would not be here.
Oh, there you go. Yep. I can see that. I don't know that I often do that. I think I'm living more in the future than I feel comfortable sometimes. With all the different possibilities,
Can't do that because somebody's going to temporal reverse engineer you. And
Oh, gosh, you're right. And recently in my life, I've learned that the power of goals is something not to be scoffed at.
Yes. There were two things that I liked about that whole encounter between Gail and Trisha.
Mm-hmm.
The first was during a rereading of the book. Gail calls astrology harmless.
Mm-hmm.
And she also says it's not the end of the world.
Right.
Little things peppered in throughout the whole book, kind of giving you an idea of what you're in for.
Right. And is this where she talks about the structure of astrology and how it's just a set of rules and it could be any kind of set of rules that you could work with and create a new dynamic?
Yes, I thought that sounded very good, but I cannot believe it would be the feeling of an astrologist.
You're right.
I liken it to professional wrestling, as in how upset they get if you call it fake, because it's not fake, and they'll show you how not fake it is if you want, because they put their bodies on the line for your entertainment all the time. It's choreographed.
Right.
And there's predetermined results, but that doesn't mean it's fake.
Oh, gosh. Sounds like reality TV to me, that's for sure.
And when the astrologist was talking so nonchalantly about, of course it's not real, like that didn't ring as a true character to me. I couldn't believe that prominent of an astrologist would be so nonchalant about, of course it's not real.
Oh, and all I can think about is, if you were to ask an ancient alien astronomer what they believe happened, they'll tell you they did, in fact, visit the Earth.
Right. Yes.
Like he's got some other option, you know? If he believes, he believes, you know?
Right.
You can't say, well, I don't believe today, but I'll believe tomorrow. That'll be fine.
Right. However, they pretty much end the whole encounter with Trisha and Gail with a note. Trisha was in the bar having this conversation with Gail when the chauffeur for the TV studio in New York came in and said, "We need you for the interview. I've been trying to find you for an hour." He asked her, "Don't you need your bag or something?" She's like, "If there's one thing I've learned, you don't go back for your bag." Goes, doesn't have her contact lenses. She can't read anything. The interview goes horribly. There's no way she got that job. When she got back to the hotel, there was a note from Gail saying how sorry she was it didn't go so well.
Right.
So Gail predicted that the interview was going to go very poorly.
She did, and that was nice. That was a good touch.
She went talking about how, of course, it's not real, but then showed it was accurate.
Yes, and we all can empathize with Tricia. She sat there on her bed looking through her bag saying, "Oh well, oh well, oh well."
Yes. So now that they have introduced Trisha on this Earth, Adams knows that the readers want answers as to where's Trillian and Trisha and how is this all possible. So the book goes into explaining parallel universes. Once again, we are told that they are not understandable, so don't even try.
Right.
And we are also told it is only comprehensible at all to those who have reached the level of advanced God. So here he throws in one of my favorite lines. "It is now well established that all known gods came into existence a good 3/millionth of a second after the universe began,
Right.
rather than, as they usually claimed, the previous week." Here's where we are told about the Wizagum, or the whole sort of general mishmash, and that parallel universes are not parallel because it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It also states that this particular Earth that the dolphins plucked from another dimension differs from the previous one very slightly.
Right.
Apparently, one neutrino hit an atom that caused the dominant variety of clover to have 4 leaves instead of 3.
And then it became the lucky 3-leaf clover.
So then they go on and on and on about all of the differences on this Earth because of that one neutrino creating the dominant, and I just have a real difficult time in piecing out that logic, especially about the abnormally low sales of pecan-flavored ice cream.
Oh, but I love it because he says, I mean, if you look at it all, it's just cross-eyed badger spit. And
Yes.
Kevin knows the answer.
Yes, Kevin does.
So while he's speaking about the whole sort of general mishmash, and in probably in later conversations, he talks about something that I hadn't really considered. When I consider parallel universes, I'm like many people in that you can see parallel universes splitting off in different directions, and most of the shows you watch suggest that parallelism happens based on choice. So if you make X choice instead of Y choice, out there the universe continues with the Y choice, even though you made the X choice. So off it spins in a direction with, again, it's attached to a chronological approach to parallelism,
But I would consider that more of a branching.
Yes, a branching approach, but it also is chronological because the choice has to be made and then it goes forward from there.
Right.
It doesn't go backwards. I mean, we are going to talk about reverse temporal engineering here, but in this particular case, it goes forward from each decision making process.
Right.
That another universe splits off, infinitely in every direction. But as we talked about before, I think we had a conversation about the idea that I had in my head that, that it's more of a global approach to parallelism where it expands in every dimension, in every direction, which is really kind of hard to fathom. I mean, it's like every world goes from this shade of pink to another shade of pink to another shade of pink, and it's just out and out in every direction. So it's sight, it's sound, it's a sense of touch, it's feeling. And here he talks about something that I hadn't even considered, and that is where the branching of the universe, parallelism of the universe, can be affected by probability. That comes back to the whole improbability drive of that the story starts off with. So
right,
it's interesting because now you can kind of see the blooming that they talk about of potential Earths and the cascading effect of actions and activity.
Yeah, well, the probability thing is accurate, and that's what I look back at in my branching of all the possible where my life could have branched. Right. The one that I always go back to all the time is if my boss didn't forget his briefcase, I wouldn't own a horse farm. So I guess a neutrino hitting a 3-leaf clover could possibly make all of this stuff happen. It's kind of hard to find the dominoes that lead that way.
Right. And again, he's just simply suggesting that the butterfly effect is an effect here.
Correct.
You're right. I mean, it is impossible for us to fathom what it is. Why would a 4-leaf clover being dominant affect all these other things that allow these people to continue to exist? That it's badger spit, as he said.
It's badger spit, yes.
Oh, I'd love to meet Kevin, though. That would be kind of cool.
Right. So Trisha finally gets back home to London, and she needs to feel better, so she's thinking about going to this new hip and trendy place where all the media personalities frequent.
Mm-hmm.
And it is right here that he gives all the pieces of a puzzle to you in a different order.
Right.
So much so that you don't even know that they're pieces to a puzzle.
Well, of course we did, because this is not our first introduction to this
right.
item.
But the first time you read it, you'd have no idea it was pieces of a puzzle.
Nope, not a chance. Not a chance.
Second time through, you're like, oh, he told us right here. This is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then guess what? We get to listen to Trisha having to experience another tedious conversation. This time with the Grebulons.
Oh, yes.
Because when she gets home from the bar, because it's closed for a private event, the Grebulons land in her backyard and ask her a favor. So then we cut to Ford, and he is at the offices of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Once again, Adams is adding to the confusion by calling the building of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy H-shaped.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to make it seem like it's H for Hitchhiker, but as you've pointed out, it's just a building style, and it is purely coincidental that it looks like a giant H.
Right. But it is kind of funny in this. By the time we get to this book, he's making references to how often the offices have moved from planet to planet. In that
Right.
original book, how long did it take for those letters to sink into the earth, or sink into the soil of that planet? It's a little discontinuous, in my opinion.
Yes, and no, and I can answer that.
Okay.
He's talking about the headquarters jumping from planet to planet to planet.
Mm-hmm.
The letters sank into the customer service department.
Oh, right. You're right. Maybe they don't move. Yep.
They don't move. The customer service department is there because who cares if they get found? It's the headquarters that has to pay all the tax. And so they keep jumping from planet to planet to avoid legal troubles and taxes and all the whole general mishmash.
Right, exactly. And I do like the way he's kind of taken the idea of nano-engineering into the building, saying that it comes apart piece by piece and goes back together exactly as it was on the new planet. That's one of the funnier parts about the story of Ford, jumping into the editor's office, is he's expecting everything to be exactly where it's supposed to be, and none of it is.
Mm-hmm.
So he keeps bumbling around trying to get his way through.
Yes. So now I have a question about no good idea gets wasted.
Okay.
And if this is one, and what is your idea on this? So I don't even know if you have any idea what I'm talking about here.
I'm not sure I do.
Okay. When we read Doctor Who and the Cricket Men,
Yes.
there is a scene where the Doctor, in his extreme cleverness, uses tape and a marker to relabel the switch that turned off every robot.
Right.
So the robots would turn themselves off.
Mm-hmm.
When that happened, the robot was in a leaning forward position, and then it fell forward and turned the switch back on. And then it noticed it was on, but thought it was off because of the tape, and turned itself back off again. Right. And he was in an endless loop of going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
In this book, he talks about the herring sandwich experiments.
Yes.
Where a robot is programmed to like herring sandwiches. So he goes, oh, a herring sandwich. He picks up the herring sandwich, and when he stands back up, he is designed that the herring sandwich falls out of his scoop. And then he goes, ooh, a herring sandwich. And he's in an endless loop. Now, did Douglas Adams have this idea in his original Cricket Men book that he finally used here, or did Goss steal this to use in the Cricket Men book?
Oh gosh, I wish I had an answer for that. It's impossible to know. I think I did notice the parallel, as you said.
I wish it was in the real Life, the Universe, and Everything book.
Mm-hmm.
With the Cricket Men and all of that. But he didn't put it in Life, the Universe, and Everything. He went some other way.
Right.
It's this whole chicken and an egg, and I'm trying to come up with a piece of logic that will make me go, oh, it had to be this way. Right. But I can't.
Right, exactly. No, I see that. And I think we alluded to the fact that we had a small conversation earlier, and the herring sandwich robot is a key feature, in my opinion, to the conversation that we will post in the future.
The reason he did the whole herring sandwich bit was because Ford had captured a security robot that he made very happy by jumping the circuits.
Yes.
So basically it was talking about making robots happy during a course of logic things, and Ford bypassed all that by jumping the circuits to make the robot happy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Then he had a conversation with the security robot that really reminded me of the conversation that Marvin had in the swamp with Zem the mattress.
Oh, Zem.
Didn't those sound similar?
Yes, they did.
So here's something that it's kind of outside the book thinking. So the name of the new owner of the guide is Infinidim Enterprises.
Right.
And the editor-in-chief told Ford that they spent millions on the name, so he better like it.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me think that Adams came up with the name. he didn't like it. So he put it in as a placeholder until he could come up with a better name. And then could never come up with a better name. So then he told us, you better like it, because that's just what it is.
Oh, I feel like we've gotten to know him so well, haven't we?
Yes. The one thing I did like about the new owners of the guide is that they want to change their focus to not marketing the guide to the penniless hitchhikers.
Right.
Why are we taking the one section of the population that doesn't have any money and marketing it to them? Never made sense.
Nope.
So when you are reading the novels a second time, you can pick out little things that don't mean anything special at the time, but are really meaningful once you know the end.
Yep.
First one I noticed is when Ford ordered his towel to kill and jumped for the Dino Charge card issued to him.
Right.
And the editor-in-chief of the guide was startled back into the rocket-proof window and was knocked out. It then said, Ford lay on the desk, surprised at how swimmingly everything had gone.
Right.
So here's Ford going, wow, that went well. That couldn't have gone any better. It'll continue to go that way for Ford.
Yes, it will.
Until, yeah.
Until
it
gets
doesn't.
hit on the head with a rock, right?
That's right.
Oh, gosh. And here, while he's attacking Zaldago,
Right.
This is where we find out the concept of the Identa-Ease card. This is
Right.
another thing that Ford was able to steal from Zaldago. And it's a identity card that tells you everything you need to know about the individual who holds the card.
Correct.
All of their specific information, all the way down to their DNA. So it's a very valuable thing to have. And, of course, Ford pilfers it as he's taking the Dino Charge card as well.
Yes.
But they do have a short conversation about, Zaldago does anyway, with Ford about the new direction for sales of the guide, in that they are imagining that they would sell one guide to billions of futures rather than billions of guides to one future.
Right.
And I thought that was kind of an interesting foreboding as they were discussing that.
Yes, I can't figure out how that works because you've only got one, but, I think they have an idea, but I bet it doesn't go well.
Well, yeah, see, and this is where, there's a deep conversation here, and I think we've talked a little bit about that. When he's talking about the guide and, well, I'm sorry, maybe we should leave this for a little bit later and when he actually picks up the guide Mark II.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Part 2. A year after Fenchurch disappeared in a hyperspace accident, Arthur is searching the universes, trying to find an Earth where he could be happy. Seeking guidance and advice, Arthur went to Howelius, a planet of oracles and seers and soothsayers, and also takeaway pizza shops. The first prophet he met was closing down and blamed the radio, which was broadcasting events that are to take place in the future. One of the reporters was Trillian Astra. Arthur recognized her voice. Next, Arthur found an old woman oracle living in a disgusting squalor. She printed out her life story, highlighted all her major life decisions, and told him to do the opposite of everything she did. Finally, Arthur found an area where there were 50 to 60 foot high poles. On the top of one, he discovered an old man who told him to buy a beach house, gave him some very generic, impressive sounding advice, and a personal prayer. Arthur asked him if he knew of Stavromula Beta. This is a place Arthur was told by Agrajag that he had to visit before he could die. The old man had not heard of it. Arthur went to the Resettlement Advice Center on Pendleton Alpha to find a planet he could live on where the people looked sort of human. The inhabitants on the planet he found were very human-like, but were too boring and their slightly off behavior was too unnerving, so he left. While continuing his search for somewhere to live, the ship he was on crashed on an uncharted planet. He was the sole survivor. Even though he lay dazed, broken, and bleeding, he knew he would survive. He had not yet been to Stravomula Beta. Ford used his happy security robot and the editor-in-chief's ID card to get into the central computer. He wants to hack into the computer to program it to automatically approve all of the expenses he has using his new company credit card. When he was installing that code, he discovered there was a similar code already installed and decided to find out what it was hiding. He first had to return the editor-in-chief's ID card before he knew it was missing. When Ford returned to the editor-in-chief's office, he was able to return the ID card. There were also Vogons in the office, and one of them fired a rocket into the office window. The force of the explosion sent the security robot out of the window. Ford jumped. Ford's life was flashing through his mind as he fell. He was distracted from this as he noticed the windows on the 13th floor were darkened and could not be seen into. Ford called the security robot and caught it in his towel. He told it to go up. Ford's progress was slowed dramatically, but needed to go up to avoid what was waiting for him on the ground. On the ground, a Vogon was preparing to shoot another rocket at Ford. Ford kicked off a shoe, and the rocket that was launched hit his shoe 15 feet from the ground, eliminating his attackers and providing a shockwave that propelled him up to the 13th floor. He peered through the darkened glass and thought he saw some kind of bird. Using his newly issued credit card, he flipped the latch on the window and went inside. The room was basically empty. On the wall was a poster for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Mark II. On a workbench, Ford saw a black disc the size of a small plate with panic written on it in small, alarming letters.
So then we will jump over to Arthur. This is the first appearance that he makes in the book.
Yep.
He's still mourning the loss of Fenchurch, and he is jumping from universe to universe to universe, going to the coordinates where the Earth should be, and he can't find one that's anywhere close to Earth. They describe one called Now What that has bog hogs on it. It all started out, again, in his overly graphic, disgusting way, like he was doing with the short story Young Zaphod Plays It Safe.
Right.
It describes a picture of the late president that was displayed because they had not replaced the president yet. So the picture was him after he committed suicide by shooting himself in the head. So it's like a crime scene photo is the official photo of the president. But they did retouching.
Yes, with crayon.
With crayon. He likes crayon. He's bringing crayons back.
Oh, but I love how the bog hogs, the bog hogs communicate with each other by biting the other bot hog on the thigh very hard.
Correct. So then comes another sick scene. There was basically a bellman at this hotel that he was at bringing Arthur's bag, and he got bitten by a bog hog. And so he points to a stick, and Arthur takes the stick and uses it to beat the bog hog until it let go. And then the bellman jumped up to his feet, grabbed the stick, and beat the bog hog's brains into a sticky, pulpy mess.
Yeah, a little graphic.
It was like, yeah. So, yeah, he's getting into his graphic, disgusting scenes.
Well, you know what? And I thought about that a little bit after we discussed that particular issue from the bonus episode that we just did. Do you remember the Monty Python sketch I think it's from one of the movies where they're feeding a gentleman at a restaurant?
Yes, that would be The Meaning of Life.
Oh, yes, the meaning of life. And they keep feeding him until he explodes.
Right. Yes. Yeah. They offered him one wafer thin mint at the end of his
exactly. Wafer thin.
meal. Yeah.
I wondered if that wasn't parallel humor or part of the humor that Douglas is looking for in this particular scene or scenes like that.
It could be, but it doesn't read that way.
Yeah, it doesn't.
One of my favorite sketches in Monty Python is, I think it's just titled Tennis Anyone? And a guy comes up and says, tennis anyone? And somebody like throws him a tennis ball and it hits him in the shoulder and his arm falls off and blood starts and he falls into somebody else who loses a leg and the blood. I mean, so limbs are just falling off and blood is spraying everywhere. It's hysterically comical.
Yes.
This was not written that way to me.
Yes, the comedy was missing because they described the poor bog hog after being hit with the stick and his jaw is dislocated and he's no longer going to be able to communicate with the world because that's how he communicates, and it's kind of a sad and pathetic thing. And then of course the butler beats his brains out.
Right. There was one funny part to me in that whole scene about the bog hogs, though. And that was that this planet now what is a cold, wet, rainy, damp planet. And the natural wildlife there are the bog hogs. But you can't even use them as a commodity because their skins aren't waterproof or keep you warm.
Right.
And so they're trying to find out how the bog hogs survive and can flourish on this planet because their skins don't work as protection. And they said, like, if you could ask them, though, you'd find out that they don't. And they're as miserable and cold as everybody else.
That's right. Cold and wet as everybody else. Yep. Absolutely.
So we leave Arthur for a while because he's still trying to find another planet. And we jump over to what Ford is doing. And he's trying to get into the central computer of the guide, so he can put a program that'll automatically validate all of his company credit card expenses because he's got this new Dino Charge card.
Right.
So he comes to a door that said, no admittance, not even to authorized personnel. You are wasting your time here. Go away. I expected it to have one more line.
What? Beware of the leopard?
Beware of the leopard. Yes.
Oh man, that's perfect.
Shouldn't it have said beware of the leopard? Like it's this universal.
Oh gosh, engendered fear. Yes, I got it. Oh, I love this scene though. It's Adams's use of environmental humor is what I call it. But in this particular case, Ford is in a universe that is only virtual, but he's
right.
It's like impossible heights and frightening potential for falling and all this kind of thing. And he says here at one point, he rose, he gripped, he clamored as he tried to ascend to the top of the mountain. Or was it the building? I don't know.
I thought it was on like a rock face or a cliff.
Yes, it was a rock face. You're right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that whole description reminded me of Tron.
Right. Yep. And then I love the line that even in a virtual universe, you are as dead as you think you are.
Right. It's kind of like that if you die in your dream, you'll die in real life.
Right.
You know, it's got to put that in kids' heads when they go to sleep at night.
Oh, sounds like a good idea. During his travels within the virtual universe, Ford discovers that there's a mental block.
Right.
And the only thing that he's able to determine about the mental block is it seems to have something to do with, dun, 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 the 13th floor.
Right. Because that's when he was installing his own mental block so that he could get all of his credit card things approved automatically.
Right.
I can believe that Ford has the capability of jumping 2 circuits of a security robot to make it happy. but I have trouble believing he has the knowledge of hacking the guy's computer the way they described it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a challenge there, but it is a virtual space, so I'm not sure. I'm curious about that too.
It sounded like he didn't sit there so much and program as he installed a already written program, so I could see where he, through a black market, could get some kind of malware that he could install once he got inside.
Right.
He certainly could not have written that program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the weird thing,
Yeah. Well, then we're going to jump back to Arthur, and he's on the planet Hawalius, and he is seeking wisdom. It was also said to have a lot of pizza shops, because most mystics were completely incapable of cooking for themselves. So I had to look it up, because I was just wanted to see how close it was, and this book was written in 1992.
Okay.
And the movie Mystic Pizza came out in 1988. So this was after Mystic Pizza, so I'm wondering if that whole concept of Mystic Pizza found its way into his description here.
I think so. That's the first thing I thought about when he mentioned it.
Right. Same page here then. Good.
Uh-huh.
And then he did use the timeless adage that can be used by many, many professions who are unable to perform their services on themselves, which is, when looking for a good oracle, find the oracle that other oracles go to.
Yep, there you go.
Oh, then do you want to talk about our second disgusting scene of the book?
Oh, gosh, I'm not sure I do.
Was this one funny?
Well, I remember this scene very well from my previous readings. For some reason, this particular scene sticks in my head.
Okay, I can believe it.
I just thought it was funny that when Arthur gets there, he starts talking with a gentleman that's closing up his shop, and the guy is quite dejected because all of the things that Trillian has been reporting on about the future and the probability and these kind of things have basically eviscerated the potential for income for the mystics, because there's nothing that's a mystery anymore. Right. And then he says, oh, it'll all end in tears. And then he's hammering up the sign and he hits his thumb and he starts talking in tongues.
Right.
I thought that was great.
So he was talking about Trillian and her possibly wanting to get married and have a kid, but it'll all end in tears. But he was wrong about her because he then hits his thumb, which makes it all end in tears.
Right. Oh gosh. Yeah, and then they wander. I say they, but I mean Arthur wanders off to find the blind woman with the ping pong paddle.
Right. What I found funny is that because they've all closed up shop, there was a sign on the door of a closed one that said, "Try next door." That's not really a prediction. It's it's like
it's just a suggestion.
Just a suggestion. And then we get the smelly old lady in the cave with all of the goat-like parts and stews and solar-powered photocopier and...
Oh my gosh.
So the good thing about that, though, is that this woman is in, like, the worst situation that you could even imagine. Mm-hmm. And Arthur's asking her for advice, and so she then photocopies her life story, highlighting every decision she's ever made, and said, just do the opposite. It's kind of like, if you do the opposite of everything I did, you'd be good. Mm-hmm. Which reminded me of a Seinfeld episode where George decides to do the opposite of everything he did, and his life started changing for the better. Right. But he couldn't keep it up. He couldn't keep it up because nature will prevail.
But I do like, there's some, and I think part of what makes me remember this particular scene is, again, Douglas's use of the environmental humor. He talks about them trying to trundle the copy machine out of the old woman's cave. Right. And Arthur is like choking and gagging, and the old woman says, oh, just go outside, take a breath, and come back in, because she knows how bad it is.
Yeah, oh yeah, she's fully aware how horrible it is.
I always had that vivid memory of her swinging the ping pong bat around and the excitement she'd get when she'd actually hit one of those bottle-sized flies, and they go thwack.
Right.
And smash into the wall.
Arthur had kind of puked in the entrance of her cave, and he didn't know if he should leave without cleaning it up, but he didn't know if he could get close enough to clean it up without adding to it as opposed to cleaning it up.
Yep.
And then he gets to the man on the top of the poles.
Oh, gosh, yes.
And this was a scene right out of the first book with the man who rules the universe.
Mm-hmm.
This was the same type of conversation that we've already read before.
Right. And this is where they talk about boundary conditions, for humans like to live in boundary conditions.
Yes.
And the old lady mentioned in her story that she turned down the beach house, and this mystic actually bought the beach house.
Right. He's having a conversation with Arthur, telling him that because of the boundary conditions, he should get a beach house. Mm-hmm. And he has a beach house, and a beach house doesn't actually have to be on the beach, but the best ones always are. And
that a beach house is a state of mind, he says.
Yes. And that the old woman down there was supposed to get the beach house, but she turned it down, so that's how I ended up with it. What did she tell you to do?
Do the opposite of everything I told you.
In other words, get a beach house.
Now it sounds like we're talking about lobsters.
Yes. I tell you, when you read all of his stuff back to back to back, there's recurring themes and styles, that is for sure.
Right, and it is in here that he sees a globe of the earth, and it says, I've got it written down here, that it said that you create a universe by perceiving it.
Yes, that it's another one of the things. Yeah, your universe is the one you perceive. Like I said, just like the man who rules the universe.
Right, exactly. And this is where I start to begin to understand the concept of the new guide.
Okay.
Because, well, we're about to find out about the Guide Mark II. This is where we find out that the idea that Zaldago had about selling one guide to 1 billion futures starts to kind of play into it, because here we're told that you create a universe by perceiving it. So with that being the concept here, you start to understand how one guide becomes 1 billion guides, because for every perceived reality, every perceived universe, there is a guide.
Correct. But they only have one, and all the other ones just appear in the afterwards. So I don't see how they're going to make money. They're still only selling one guide. It will just then branch off 1 billion times.
Mm-hmm. Well, they sell it at each, well, in the concept wise, they sell it in each universe. So they sell it 1 billion times because it exists in all of them.
Which also means they've got 1 billion offices.
I know. The logics don't all fall together too neatly, There's an accordion here that's about to make a big loud sound.
Okay. Was that a metaphor?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
So now we've reached the scene in the office where Ford is returning the identities card that he pilfered off the guy. And the office has got Vogons in it.
Mm-hmm. The Infinitum Enterprises is all Vogons.
So one of them, I thought the Vogons were just the security people. Because the guy that he was talking to that he took the identities off of, he wasn't a Vogon.
No, he wasn't a Vogon. He just worked for, the guide, which was then owned by Infinitum. So
right, and I think the security is Vogons.
Oh, okay.
That's how I interpreted it.
Makes perfect sense.
The security are in the office, and they are Vogons, and one of them fired a rocket. And I don't know who they were shooting at or why, and it must have been Ford, because then they went outside and shot at him when he was falling down after he jumped out the window.
Mm-hmm.
but why are they shooting it forward with a rocket launcher? It seems a little overkill. Did you understand all that?
Why they were shooting it forward with a rocket launcher? No, but I think Ford is on the list of people that they definitely want dead.
Okay, but now it didn't dawn on me until right now, but here's why they were shooting at Ford with a rocket launcher.
Oh, you know now. Good.
I do.
Okay.
Because they had to break the window in the office. They had to have Ford jump out of the office. They had to have Ford kick off his shoe on the way down to create the updraft to make him land on the ledge of the 13th floor where he could get in and get the book and then fall out and land in a ship. Do you know? So this is the reverse temporal engineering. So there's no logical reason why they should have been shooting at Ford inside an office building with a rocket launcher, except that was the only way they could get Ford to the 13th floor.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where in every time dilemma story or every time story that's ever been written, where the first time through, is that really the first time through, you know?
Right.
And then, of course, they play all higgledy-piggledy with it when they start making the assumption that there was such a thing as reverse temporal engineering.
Yeah. So to point out another example of Adams and his unusual way of phrasing or describing things, when the Vogons were firing the rocket launcher in the office, he writes, "Flames leapt from the back of the rocket launcher." Most authors would stop there.
Right.
But he adds, "and a rocket leapt from its front." So it's just that little extra thing that everybody knows what happened. You know, many times I have read about flames coming out of the back, but they always just assume I'm going to realize that a rocket was going out the front. But Adams made sure that we knew.
Right.
So then we go back to Arthur trying to find a planet to live on. Once again, Adams is trying to be as gross as possible. The clerk from the Resettlement Advice Center on Pintleton, Alpha. The creature was helping him and was slimy and tentacled, and when it needed a file out of a filing cabinet, it would swallow the entire filing cabinet, then it would vomit up a drawer, remove the file, swallow the drawer, and then vomit up the cabinet. It was just like, all of this vomiting. And when Arthur was trying to discuss what type of planet he wanted, he was thinking that he'd have a lot to offer because, you know, he's from a, civilized world and he knows lots of things, but he realized that he would be of no value because he knew how to use everything, but he really couldn't create anything.
Right.
And that whole scene made me think of something from 1,000,000 years ago.
Oh, yeah?
And it involves your father. So
okay.
Can we talk about it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
You were in Chicago for a convention for your business. And I met you there at the Sheraton Hotel. And we went to a little French restaurant that somebody told your dad about.
Right.
And I believe he actually ordered the foie gras, even though it's been banned from Chicago and you couldn't put it on the menu. But if you asked for it, you could still get it at some of these places because, they're not going to tell me what I can or can't sell. And at the end of the dinner, he ordered a drink of something I had never heard of.
Okay.
It was like cognac, but it wasn't cognac.
Okay.
And I don't remember if I had it or not. And years later, I was thinking about it, and I remember asking you what that drink was, and you didn't even remember the situation. So I'm like, well, what is a cognac that's not like a cognac? And you still weren't able to give me an answer. So then I'm reading this. And it says, when Arthur was trying to settle on a planet, he realized he would be of no value to them, since he knew a lot of things but did not know how any of it worked, like cars and computers and ballet and almanac.
Armanac.
Could almanac be what your dad ordered?
Oh, very much so. Mm-hmm.
So here, I got an answer to a question.
You've had for 20 years.
Yes.
Armagnac, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Armagnac.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I wouldn't have recalled my dad drinking that. Crown Royal, yes. Crown Royal of every type and flavor, yes. But I don't remember Armagnac.
I remember him sitting there talking to the waitress going, "Do you have Armagnac?" And like, yes. And so, I think he made us all drink some of that.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Because he doesn't ever do anything by himself.
No. Oh, gosh. And I do like foie gras, that's for sure.
Bit cruel to the geese, don't you think?
No, I hate geese.
But I love their liver.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so funny. I mean, I don't know if you noticed this, and maybe it's been going on for years, and but it seems like, actually, I do know a little bit about what's happening, but it's really kind of an odd thing. The Canadian geese, the regular brown-colored geese that you see all over, and
right.
you used to see them flying in their thousands up north during the fall and coming back down south
right.
in the spring, that kind of thing. But as it turns out now, there are many, many more Canadian geese that are no longer doing that trek back and forth.
Okay.
Obviously, they're saying it's for environmental reasons, which does make sense, I guess, if it's warmer and they can find shelter and live in locations that are further to the south. But it makes sense. But what I thought was interesting is there's more and more and more of them. I don't know if you're having this in your area, but there are flocks of Canadian geese that never leave.
Oh.
And I don't know about you, but when I go for a walk, the last thing I want to do is walk through a field of where Canadian geese have been.
No, that is they lay down a carpet of it.
Exactly. And over by where I work, there's a large flock of them. But I did find out recently, though, that it is legal to shoot Canadian geese as long as they're the kind that don't migrate north or south. And I'm laughing because I don't know how the hell you would know that.
That's my question.
No, wait a minute. Do you have to interview each individual goose before you shoot it?
You just got to make sure you plant a passport on him or take his passport. If he's got a passport, you hide it.
Right. Look, he's got no visa.
He's got no visa.
He's not going anywhere.
He's not going anywhere.
Oh, my gosh.
So after the encounter with the guy at the relocation center, Arthur was looking for and chose a planet that had people that looked like him.
Mm-hmm.
But they were boring and they had boring literature, so he waited for an accident to happen. And Adams writes, "The trouble with trying to make the right accident happen is that it won't. That's not what accident means." He left the planet and there was another hyperspace blip and he crashed on an uncharted planet.
Right.
We cut back to Ford. And here is where there is a scene that fits into the no good idea gets wasted. In secondary phase, Ford and Zaphod fell out of the cup and onto a giant bird.
Right.
And then Ford used his towel to cover the eyes of the bird to make it land.
Mm-hmm.
Here, after the Vogons shot out the window and he had no choice, like I mentioned earlier, he jumped out the window.
Right.
And as he was falling, he had his security robot flying near him, so he threw his towel over the security robot to slow down his fall. He was hoping that he could fly upwards, but small security robot couldn't raise him at all.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where he kicked off his shoe right as they fired a rocket, and the concussion left a giant pit with nasty bits in it on the ground. And
that used to be Vogons.
And hurled him upwards to where he landed on the ledge of the 13th floor of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy building, where the windows were darkened.
And one of my favorite lines here is actually they're talking about the riots, the telephone riots that caused the climate control condition where
Yes.
they had to seal or allow every window to be opened because of the climate control and the potential for disastrous things to happen.
Right.
And at one point, they're talking about all the things that happened during the riot, and all the telephone folks were out on the streets making noise. And he said one of them was, volume swack and
Right.
other animal noises.
Right.
I just thought it was funny that he said he had specific sounds that people would really enjoy saying when they had the opportunity. And they keep repeating farms and sheep in this story too.
Yes.
Did you notice that?
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure the significance, but yes, I did notice.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's where we're going to leave you with part 1. We're going to do a fun, silly bonus episode in between. It's basically going to reference a part we haven't got to yet, but I'll explain it during the bonus episode. Come back the first Thursday of March to hear part 2 of our discussion of Mostly Harmless. Thank you for listening to Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea. Look for us the first Thursday of every month for a full episode. We will also release a bonus episode later in the month. A very special thanks goes out to Luke, Max, Greg, and Tim Lesnick for arranging and performing our opening theme. We would also like to thank our talented friends and family for their voice work on our introductions and commercials. A special thanks this episode to Lily and Lucy Lesnick for portraying the granddaughters of Paula Nancy Millstone Jennings for our opening. For this episode, a special thank you to Carly Rounds for portraying 2/3 of Eccentrica Golumbitz for our commercial. We would also like to thank Kelly Lesnick for doing our summary. Visit our website at digitalwatchesareaprettyneatidea.buzzsprout.com, where you can find links to all my Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy inspired t-shirt designs. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube as Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea, on Instagram as Watches Idea Podcast, and on Twitter at Watches Idea. If you'd like to contact us, our email is digitalwatchespodcast@gmail.com.
This has been a Froods for Thought production.